In the last scene of the movie Venom, we see this character stop a thief by telling him that the next time he sees him robbing someone, he will eat his face, his arms and his legs, only to then change his mind and eat his head right there. This attitude of Venom in which he does good, that is, stop thieves, but through lethal and even exaggerated methods for the situation, are some of the characteristics we associate with the so-called anti-heroes. However, it should be clarified that these types of characters who resort to extreme methods to achieve what they perceive as justice are just one type of anti-heroes. Over the years, there have been other types of anti-heroes who are nothing like Punisher or Venom. In fact, believe it or not, Steven Universe, yes, that boy who has the power to heal through his saliva and who solves conflicts through understanding and comprehension, could also be considered an anti-hero. Welcome to Go, your source for bite-sized geek culture to nourish the mind. Today we'll discuss the 5 types of anti-heroes. The most popular definition today of the word anti-hero is that it is a character who commits morally correct actions, but not always for the right reasons or by the appropriate methods. Following the example at the beginning of the video, Venom is a character who seeks to reduce crime, something that is morally good, but he does it first and foremost to satisfy his personal need to eat brains, not because he seeks justice itself. Not only that, but the fact of killing someone in a situation that does not warrant it also does not sound very heroic. This is the definition and the type of examples that regularly come to mind when we talk about anti-heroes. But there are other older examples that have completely different characteristics to this. In literature, an anti-hero is a character who is regularly the protagonist of their story but lacks heroic qualities. The definition of an anti-hero is entirely dependent on how a hero is defined. Because to some extent, the anti-hero is what the hero is not. But well, what is a hero? A hero is a character who represents the greatest virtues of a society. The characteristics of heroes vary depending on the time and place in which they exist. In the Renaissance game, for example, it was considered that heroes were people who represented Christian morality and were close to God, something that today, well, is really no longer relevant to be a hero. Don Quixote, for example, is an example of an anti-hero in literature, as it was a satire of the brave, strong, and invincible knights of the stories of those years. Having said this, what are today's heroes and anti-heroes like? According to the theory of psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who has studied the subject for decades, we could say that a hero today has 8 qualities: intelligence, strength, resilience, altruism, kindness, charisma, must be trustworthy and inspiring. However, not all heroes possess all 8 of these traits. For example, Batman in some versions is not the most charismatic person in the world, but the more heroic qualities a character has, the closer it gets to our social conception of what a hero should be. If we follow this line of what a hero currently is, we can also get an idea of what an anti-hero currently should be. There are 5 types of anti-hero. Not all of them have names that are commonly accepted, so I'm going to take their names from some of their characteristics. The first type is the classic anti-hero. These are characters that challenge our perception of what a classic hero should be. Let's say our own version of Don Quixote, a character who does good but strays from what we commonly consider a hero should be. At this point, we have characters like Steven Universe, who doesn't start his story being particularly strong or brave. Nor is he a good warrior. He is a character who is more in touch with his feelings and avoids battles when he can. And even his powers are particularly defensive. We can't deny that Steven is indeed a hero for the decisions he makes or the actions he takes, but his heroism strays from the classic vision we have of these characters. At this point, we also have Shinji from Evangelion, a character who does try to save people and generally tries to act well, but also tends to have episodes of depression and is even capable of committing quite deplorable acts. Yes, I'm referring to the hospital scene with Asuka. The second type of anti-hero is the reluctant, represented by characters like Han Solo, who really aren't interested in being heroes and prefer to stay out of situations that don't concern them. However, if this type of characters witness an injustice up close and there's no one else in sight, they feel the need to intervene. We can also see this in the character of Dr. Manhattan, who at one point in the Watchmen story is willing to stay on Mars and simply watch as the world destroys itself until Laurie's story convinces him to return to save the world. These types of characters usually have no problem with killing if the situation warrants it, as their morality is not as restrictive as other heroes. Let's say then that they are more neutral characters who will only perform heroic acts if circumstances force them to, not because they really want to do it. The third type is the unscrupulous hero, the anti-hero archetype most commonly envisioned. Sometimes these are characters like Venom, Punisher, or Rorschach, who have a somewhat twisted view of what justice is and the methods to achieve it. Punisher has no qualms about killing common thieves, believing they don't deserve to live without considering the circumstances that led them to thievery. However, unscrupulous heroes don't always have to be so extreme. We also see characters like Dr. House, who does save and diagnose people, but he does it mainly because he finds it an intellectual challenge, not because he cares about the person in the first place. In some episodes, he loses interest in a person's life after diagnosing them. The fourth type of anti-heroes is the heroic villain. These characters have no qualms about committing reprehensible acts like theft, murder, or deception. In fact, they frequently engage in such acts, but occasionally find themselves in circumstances leading them to do the right thing. A very clear case of this type of anti-hero is Captain Jack Sparrow, but we can also see it in some versions of Harley Quinn, who was formerly more on the side of villainy, and she used to steal and rob, but occasionally she also helped some people in her path. If you notice, up to this point we have been increasing the degree of evil in the characters since we started with characters who do good but simply do not seem like heroes. And we get to villains who occasionally do good. This means that anti-hero number 5 is the darkest of them all. In fact, so much so that maybe he can't even be called an anti-hero anymore. The fifth type is the false hero. It's a character who is basically a complete villain, but he's the protagonist of his story, which makes us as viewers create bonds of empathy with him as we experience the story through his points of view, his experiences, and we often come to understand why he behaves that way. I think the best example of this type of character is Walter White from Breaking Bad, because even though he starts out as a good father, husband, and a decent member of society, power gradually corrupts him until he ends up at a very different point from where he started. Heisenberg is definitely a villain. The series, however, makes us empathize with him, which is curious for such characters. People often romanticize them and put them on an anti-hero level when they are really just villains that we like. And there is also the term sympathetic villain that precisely talks about these types of characters who are protagonists, but not for that they are heroic. However, it should also be clarified that these classifications of anti-heroes work when we are analyzing fictional characters that were designed to function in a specific way within a story. Reality is much more complicated than that, since all of us are people full of nuances and contradictions, virtues and flaws. If you like this video, I recommend this video essay that I have about the archetype of broken heroes, where I talk about comics like The Dark Knight Returns and Old Man Logan. If you got here, I assure you that you will like it. That's all for today. I am Go, and keep seeing beyond the obvious.